Thanks for tuning into the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch.
And I'm Maul.
And welcome back to week 12 of college football. Going to get into it with all the games, sort of talk about last week, but the opponents going into this week, a couple big upsets from last week that really affected the ACC play and the Big 12 play last week. But there are some pretty good games going on this week. But before we get into that, I know Maul, he had sent us a text. Pops isn't able to do it today. He's off flying. So Maul had a good comparison for us. And so it's just going to be me having to catch this heater today. So take it over when you're ready.
Yeah, I'm bringing it up now. Let me know when you can see it.
Yep, I see it.
Okay, so this, I think, this was from last week, so it doesn't necessarily stand. It doesn't necessarily stand anymore, but we've talked about this. Like, that's how ranking should be, right? Like, every week when we rank teams, it shouldn't be like, if the season ended right now, who's going to the playoffs? But it's kind of like a snapshot of, hey, at this time, in this moment, where should teams be ranked? Because we obviously have the assumption of, like, they're going to play the rest of the season, and then if they get a win, or if they, someone loses somewhere, then we change the rankings, right? But I feel like we've kind of gotten to this point of, like, we're trying to rank every single week as if the playoffs are starting based on those rankings. And that's just silly to do because we haven't played all of the games, right? Like, if you lose a game, sorry, like, that's going to hurt your rankings for this week. That doesn't mean like you're out of it forever. You could easily work your way back in with better play, but we got to do something with these rankings. And I feel like this would be a good exercise if they brought up each team's kind of resume without the logo next to it and said, hey, where do we go? I mean, it would take a long time, but you know what? Like, that's what we need to do, because right now, and I can't tell you how many people I see online that are like, well, CFP rankings had nothing to do with the AP poll or nothing to do with preseason rankings. It's like, if you really think that, you are out of your goddamn mind. Like, you take the AP poll and the CFP poll right next to each other, and it looks like it's like the whole, like, hey, let me copy you, but like, don't make it look like I copied you kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Because they're using that. And I'm not saying that, like, getting a good win over a good team shouldn't help you. It should. But, like, I can't stress this enough that all of these rankings continue to just be biased by the preseason AP poll. Because we're counting, like, good ranked wins sometimes early in the season where teams aren't ranked anymore, or vice versa, and the credit is not equally distributed. I'll just say that. So that being said, we'll get into the first matchup here, and I'll try to kind of make this quick again because these don't stand anymore, but this was last week with these two teams. All right, so Team A 7-1, Team B 6-2. They're both Power 4 schools. Team A, their one loss was to a ranked opponent, and it was a loss with a one-score game in overtime. Okay. Two of their wins were ranked against ranked teams. One of them was unranked at the time, but is now ranked, if that kind of helps at all. Again, it's like backwards looking, but like when they beat them, they weren't ranked. But that team has now worked itself back into the rankings. Okay. Just 5 of their wins were against Power 4 schools. 3 were non-Power 4 schools. And one of the wins was, one of their games was an FCS. There's more than 8 games there. So I don't know what I came up with on that, but their opponent's record is 39-31. So, a little better than 500. And same thing with Team B. I'll kind of jump over here before I get into that common opponent thing. So Team B again, 6-2. Their 2 losses were to ranked opponents. Both were 1-score games, but it's 2 losses, and they were both 1-score games. They only have 1 ranked win as opposed to Team A. And again, the team that they beat was ranked at the time, dropped out of the rankings, but has since kind of made their way back into the rankings. For Team B, 7 of their opponents were Power 4. 1 was a non-Power 4, but they were all FBS schools. There was no FCS opponents. Opponent record, a little worse than Team A, pretty close, a little bit closer to 500. But here, so I would say similar resumes up to this point, right? There's a little distinguishing differences, but pretty similar. You got any thoughts on that?
The only thing, this is where immediately you go to the Power 4. Like, one team has played 7 Power 4 teams, the others played 5, but 3 of those now Power 4. I think the thing I would really want to see, which I'm not, this is not it's more like how my brain works, is like, I'd love to know the Power 4 opponent like records that they placed, because just because Team B played 7 Power 4 opponents doesn't mean that they were all like really good teams. Like, they could have easily been under 500, and it's like, yeah, but if those other schools that you played, which clearly Team A has 2 better wins because 2 of those teams are ranked now. So you sort of sit back, and that's where my mind goes. So like, initially off the bat, I'm more leaning towards Team A, just because, hey, they only have 1 loss. It was in overtime, close game against a ranked opponent, and you got 2 ranked wins. Like, strength of schedule says, hey, you got a better win than the other team and 1 less loss.
I would agree, and again, it's kind of difficult without giving away like who is who with schedules and stuff, because then again, it's like if you just watch the season, you probably know who they are. So I'm with you at this point. It's pretty close, but I'm leaning towards Team A. Here's the more differentiating, and I hope you agree with me here. Common opponents. They have 2 common opponents. All right. We'll start with common opponent D. Both beat common opponent D by relatively the same margin. So Team A beat them 38-24. Team B beat them 25-10. So a 15-point and a 14-point victory there. Very similar. Common opponent C. Team A beat said opponent 24-21. Team B lost to this common opponent 27-24. So again, both close games, but one team beat them, one team lost to them. Who are you ranking higher?
Team A.
At this point, again, it's a no-brainer. I'm sure there's more stats and stuff that I could have thrown in here, but when you look at this, it's close, and they may be right next to each other in the rankings, but no way are you ranking Team B above Team A. Do you know who these teams are?
Team B is Notre Dame.
100% it's Notre Dame. Who's Team A?
I believe it was at the time Louisville.
It was Louisville, right? So again, at the time, though, Notre Dame was like 4 or 5 spots ahead of Louisville. And you're like, how? What world are you looking at these resumes and saying that Team B is 4 or 5 spots higher than Team A? You can't do it.
Name.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it is. Like, the blind ranking changes everything, in my opinion. Now, like I talked about before we started this, Louisville lost to who'd they just lose? Cal. They lost to Cal, and Notre Dame continued to win, right? Now it's fine. Now you're like, okay, now you can rank Louisville. I don't think anybody would have a problem with Louisville being ranked behind Notre Dame at this point. But again, you're kind of just like, how? How do you look at these and at that moment say Notre Dame should be ranked higher? And this whole like after Louisville loses to Cal, going back and being like, see, we knew the rankings were right because no. You don't get to do that. That's not how they work.
Yeah, correct.
I'll just throw one extra thing out here. If you don't mind.
No, go for it.
Let's see. All right. Just based on what you know about the rankings, don't necessarily look at Team B. I was kind of trying to make a stretch here, but it's not a great comparison. But let's look at Team A. Instead of like who would you rank higher, let's just go with the question of like should they even be ranked? Okay? So Team A, we're looking at. First off, they're 6-3. Right out of the gate, they got 3 losses. They are a Power 4 school. Their 3 losses were all to ranked teams. Okay, so again, if there's such a thing as good losses, at least all 3 of the teams they played were ranked. 4 of their wins were against Power 4 schools. 1 win was against an FCS school, and the other win was against a non-Power 4 school. So again, like not the best. Some easy cupcake games, but you know they're still playing Power 4 schools. However, all of their wins, none of those teams have a better than 500 record, including the Power 4 wins. Okay, so I get it. They're 3 losses to ranked teams. That's tough. But if you've got a better than 500 record, you're beating this team. Like that's what their schedule has shown.
You can't beat a good team.
Yeah, should they be ranked?
No.
You know who this is?
No.
Tennessee.
Yeah.
And I didn't do quite as in depth on this, but before last week, Missouri's resume looked exactly the same, almost identical. Why are these teams ranked?
Name.
SEC. They're in the SEC and they've got a name. Like that's it. And when I say like SEC bias, this isn't like the whole discussion that it's like this kind of stuff is what the SEC haters see and go, why on earth is that team ranked? Like, because the teams they're beating are like 2-7 Arkansas, and everybody's like, oh well, you know, Arkansas is a tough opponent. That just shows how deep the SEC. No. You don't get to play teams with sub 500 records and then still go, yeah, we beat a tough SEC team. BS, dude. BS. You cannot beat anybody with a better than 500 record. You don't get to be ranked. It doesn't matter that you say, oh, but our 3 losses are to really good teams. Yeah, they are. But like that doesn't mean you're good. Like ask Mississippi State, ask Florida. Like it's the same record essentially. It's the same resume. Like anytime you play a good team, you lose. I'm sorry, you don't get to be ranked.
Well, going back to your first, that's my thoughts on Notre Dame. Outside of the win against USC, which is a good win, USC is being a USC
win. It's an okay win.
I'm saying it's a good win. It's not a great win because I think USC is a better than average USC team that we've seen out of the last few years.
Sure.
But their defense is still not good. I think that USC, we're going to get to it here in a minute. I don't think they beat Iowa. Just from a standpoint of USC's defense really struggles against the run, and that's what Iowa's going to do. And their linebackers, it's one of these ones where USC fell right into that Jeremiah Love trap of like they just struggled against Notre Dame from running the football. I don't think Notre Dame's a super dynamic passing offense, but Notre Dame's getting all this. We predicted this the second they lost 2 games. It was like, do not be surprised if at the end of the year when Notre Dame rattles off 10 straight wins against really no ones that we're going, oh, they're in the playoff. Like, and that's what's happening. Like they're sitting there at 10. Unless something crazy happens at Pitt this weekend, Notre Dame's walking into the playoff. Standing up.
Agreed.
So it's frustrating. I like the Tennessee one. This is the only reason that you can put Tennessee in the top 25, and just hear me out on this one because this one like requires way more in depth, is you have to look at the teams that are left out. Is you go, do any of them, like they have 3 losses. Okay, well, who are their wins against? Oh, their wins are against teams better than 500 and their Power 4 schools. Yeah, they should be higher. Like, and this is like the problem. I really see this in the CFP rankings. I feel like we're not judging teams based upon wins this year. We're trying to rank their losses.
Agreed.
Like,
You kind of go like, okay, if we don't rank Tennessee, who else do we rank? And then you go kind of look at some of those teams and you're like, man, really nobody. Okay, I guess Tennessee's ranked. And I agree with you there. But again, this is like there needs to be like outside of this super subjective, like I'm sure I could have come up with like a Memphis resume or like a South Florida resume or something and found something better than what Tennessee has produced.
yeah, you said it when we were golfing, and I hadn't even looked at it that close, but you were dead on. The committee this year is really honing in on this head-to-head matchup.
Yeah.
Because like USC immediately above Michigan. Like you have these schools, the only one that doesn't apply to in the rankings,
Notre Dame.
yeah, in Miami. Now Miami has 2 losses against, other schools that are not heavily favored. But what's interesting, this is a deeper down the path. I saw this morning, so I'll just sort of ask. Let's say the ACC champion has 4 losses. Okay. Let's say James Madison wins out. They're 12-1. And let's say Tulane wins out and they only have the 2 losses. Is there a chance that the ACC gets left out?
Like completely? No.
Yes.
No.
Because they would, it's only the top 5 highest conference champs. Do you think in a world that, like if Duke was to win out and Duke has 4 losses, but they somehow win the ACC championship, but you got Tulane only with 2 losses and JMU with 1 loss, do you think there's a scenario that with like a lesser brand team, sort of like Duke, that the committee would slide them out?
Should there be? Absolutely. Will there be? Absolutely not. Like,
I just wanted to ask. I saw.
I can't see. I can't see a world where they leave out one of the Power 4 schools conference champions.
For 2 subpar Power 4 teams.
I would say subpar. I would just say non-Power 4. Like,
you are correct.
I can't see them doing that.
Agreed. The only reason I bring it up is because it's the ACC and they've left out the ACC for a crime far worse.
It's an absolute scenario for sure. And honestly, if they were going to leave out the AC, here's a more likely scenario. I would say if they made the decision of like, let's say it's Duke. If we don't think Duke deserves to make the playoff based on their record, what they would do is let James Madison in, call it Tulane out, and add a 4th, probably like SEC or Big Ten school.
Well, they'd have to still let Duke in because the top 5 conference finishers, even if they're not ranked in the top 25, get in. Which we haven't seen a scenario.
I see what you mean there. Yeah, okay.
They still have to. There's going to be some stuff go on that I'm really interested to see how it works out at the end, especially in ACC play, which we'll just kick it off Friday night. Always weird things happen on Friday night. Clemson goes to Louisville. So Louisville's coming off the loss to Cal. Clemson throttles Florida State at Clemson last week. It's sort of, who do you think continues the trend? Do you think Dabo is able to dig out a 4-5 Clemson squad that really hasn't played well all year outside of last week, or do you look for Louisville to drop back-to-back games? Right now, Louisville's a 2.5-point favorite.
This one's tough. I had this thought last weekend when let me bring it up real fast to pick. Oh, it was the Indiana Penn State game. It's like we know that Penn State's very, very low from the expectations what they've done this year. But at the same time, like, does that make Penn State absolutely an awful football team? No.
No.
Like there's still like this level of play that they will probably never go beneath because it's still Penn State and they still have like 3, 4, 5-star athletes on the field. Indiana almost met that when it's like, even though, yeah, we're like, dude, Penn State sucks. Are they still better than some of these like, lower ranked FCS teams? Yeah. And you get into these trappy situations where you're like, yes, Penn State sucks this year, but like there's still a level of play that you have to show up and meet because they will surprise you. Clemson is in that same boat. Does Clemson suck this year? On a Clemson standard or on like a general ACC standard? Yeah, they do. However, it is still a big name program with plenty of athletes that are going to show up and play hard-nosed football. So that's one of those teams that like you don't want to play this late in the season after a season that they've had because it's like a lose-lose. Like, should you beat them? Yes. Are they going to give you everything they can? Yes. And if you lose to them, it's going to screw your season because now you don't get the opportunity to be like, oh, well, we lost to Clemson. They're a good football team. Everyone's going to be like, yeah, not really, but they are good enough to beat you. We talked about how Cal was a decent team and like we knew that they were going to show up. Louisville losing to them I'm not super surprised, but it doesn't look good for Louisville. And this might be one of those momentum things, like you kind of mentioned, like Clemson's got a little kick behind them now because it's like we beat Florida State, we've got some back-to-back wins, and Louisville's now kind of struggling. This might be. I think Louisville's running back is out too. Isaac Brown, I think, is not going to play, and that's tough because when you're putting everything on Miller Moss, I don't know, man. I actually kind of like the 2.5 line. That might be the trappy play there where people are thinking like Clemson sucks this year and Louisville's ranked and they only got them at a 2.5 point favorite. Like smash that. And I think that's where the trap is going to be.
I got Clemson in the game. Because Louisville, that second loss now has them in terms of standings. They are behind 5 other teams who only have 1 loss in the ACC conference. So right now, you got Georgia Tech, Virginia, Pitt, SMU, and Duke all sitting with 1 loss in conference play. Pitt plays Notre Dame, but they could lose to Notre Dame. Does not affect their seeding in the ACC. So for me, Louisville is now on the outside having to hope that it's like, yo, we need some other teams to lose in order for us to have a chance. I think it's sort of what your representation of Clemson and Penn State, I think, is absolutely a factor in this game, that Clemson has athletes. Like, they have some good caliber guys. In my heart of hearts, I sort of think they show up this game. They have nothing to play for except just to be a spoiler on everyone else's season.
Well, they're still trying to get bowl eligible, right? Like people forget that too. And like if you can, Dabo is a good enough coach. Like if he can just get them in the mentality of like, hey boys, we're not winning the ACC or a Natty this year, but like some of y'all's, this is your senior year, and like you want to play in a bowl game, right? Like you want to at least go out as not this garbage Clemson team. Like let's get some wins and we can still go to a bowl.
Yeah. How do you want to be remembered later?
Yeah.
As a team that folded or came back and researched a lot second half of the season?
I'm with you, man. Give me Clemson.
Other game that evening, Minnesota goes to Oregon. Oregon, huge favorite right now, 25.5 point favorite. If anything, I feel like Oregon does not cover in games this year.
Yeah.
They're not as explosive on offense as they were with Dylan Gabriel. I'm not saying Minnesota's going to win, but I do think it's going to be closer than 25.5.
That's probably a decent line, honestly. It's going to be like a Wisconsin game where like they're never in any threat of losing the game, but they're not like running away with it by any more than like 3 touchdowns.
Then going into Saturday noon kickoff game, you got Wisconsin, who shows up last week for the first time all season.
And can we talk about that? Like, this is one of those things where when I was talking about, people go, oh, well, now the CFP guys are ranking it. They know more football than the AP. They'll get it right. And it's like, they're just like us. You know what I mean? Like they are watching some of the games, making an opinion and going, "Hey, Washington's pretty good. They're ranked." And then they lose to a Wisconsin game or team that I'm pretty sure hasn't had a lead in a football game since 2022. Like they get it just as wrong as we do sometimes, and the rankings aren't final. Like that's why I can't get through to people of like they don't know just as much as everybody else doesn't know.
Yeah. The unfortunate thing for Wisconsin is now they go into Indiana. In I'll give it to Indiana. I sort of how do I want to phrase this? Every team faces this at some point in the season.
Yes.
Like at some point in the season,
yes.
you have a big game that it's not supposed to be a big game. Like I always bring up Georgia at Missouri. Like they came back in that game, found a way to win that game. Indiana found a way to beat Penn State had that game, and they let them drive right down the made huge plays with catches. And I say that because there are so many times that you watch a team that doesn't do it, like that comes up short, and it's this haunting loss of the season. Indiana found a way to come out there with a victory. That helps the team. Like I'm not sure if they cover the 29.5 just because as we now once they get up big, it's all about do they want to continue to pat stat or do you want to stay healthy for a Big Ten championship? Like I'm going to stay healthy for a Big Ten championship. I can for sure see once they get up on Wisconsin, not fully taking the foot off the gas, but just, hey, run the football. Let's get out of here with a win.
Here's where you're right. However, I could see Indiana because again, what happened, and we know how Signetti's mindset is. I could see them having like 28-0 in the first quarter.
It's true,
and they're not going to take their foot off the gas that quickly. Like there's no way at least before half that they're taking the foot off the gas. So if you were talking covering and those kinds of things, it's going to just depend on what the score is like at halftime. If they're up 35-0 at halftime, sure, maybe in the second half they start bringing in some guys. And again, Wisconsin's really bad, like really, really bad. I know they beat Washington, but like go look at that score, go look at how the game was. Like Wisconsin's not putting up points. So, and Indiana's defense is good. So, if they're like 4 or 5 touchdown lead in that first half, I think they will cover just because they may take it off in the second half and it'll just kind of stay a stalemate at that point. But
if you want to take a good bet, it's the first half spread. Because the first half spread's going to be like 14.5, and I would smash that. Yeah. Like, if you really believe in Indiana this year, then them being up by at least 2 touchdowns in the first half, that's a pretty solid bet, in my opinion.
I agree.
Next game, I've seen a lot of people picking this as an upset, and we can have a conversation about it. South Carolina goes to Texas A&M. Right now, Texas A&M is a 19.5 point favorite. Now, let me just explain what this guy was saying, and I think you'll sort of understand where he's coming from. When you look at the Aggie schedule, their biggest win is Notre Dame, 41-40, last second touchdown. Very close game against Auburn, 16-10. They beat Mississippi State. They beat Florida, they beat Arkansas, they beat LSU and Missouri. At no point this year, outside of Notre Dame, have they played anyone that I would say is good. You just talked about Missouri. Missouri doesn't have a win against a team above a 500 record. LSU, I mean, we know that they're bad. Like, they lost to Vanderbilt. Arkansas's bad. I mean, got blown, and they barely beat Arkansas, won by 3 points. So, that being said, I know South Carolina is not a great football team. However, if the South Carolina that shows up and played Alabama that way can, if Sellers can just have a good game, if they can run the football, I'm not saying they're going to win. I think they can keep it within 3 scores. Am I crazy?
I mean, no, to keep it within 3 scores, but the guy who's calling an upset, yeah, like that guy's crazy.
I mean, that
anything can happen in college football. Like we've seen it. You know what I mean? Like this A&M team barely beat Arkansas by 3 points. So like anything can happen. But I would put South Carolina in the exact same category of LSU, Missouri, Mississippi State, Auburn. Like they're all subpar teams.
Yes.
And A&M, I can't say that they've like blown everybody out, but like if they just keep showing up and playing the same brand of football that they're playing, it should essentially go the same way that all these other games have been going.
I get it.
And honestly, while we're talking about it, considering, I don't know how A&M is not the number one team in the nation. And that's not to say, again, this is not going like that means I think A&M is going to win the Natty. Not saying that. I'm saying from a resume standpoint, who they've beaten, how they've played, they have the most convincing resume. And again, I'm not saying they're a better team than Indiana or Ohio State, but like from an Ohio State resume versus a Texas A&M resume, we could do that side by side comparison now that we know who the teams are. But in my opinion, A&M has a better convincing resume.
Give me half a second. So when we pull up Ohio State's schedule, so yes, they have the win against Texas, which somehow Texas is sitting there ranked in the, I think they're number 10.
Yeah.
And
that win was like, looked really good, started to look pretty bad, and now it's like, maybe it's actually okay again.
Which we're going to know everything we need to know after this weekend about Texas. Plain and simple. The committee's rankings, the only other win, so when you look at Ohio State, they played Grambling, then Ohio. Then they had the win at Washington, which everyone was like, hey, they got a good win. Well, Washington just lost to Wisconsin. So now you sit back and you go, okay, we'll scratch through that. Minnesota at Illinois. Illinois at the time was the number 9 team. Illinois fell off a cliff. Yet again, not a good win. At Wisconsin versus Penn State at Purdue. Who's their next 2 teams they place? UCLA, Rutgers, which you sent out this picture. And I feel like this is a good time to bring this up because it's probably one of the more interesting. Ohio State could make the Big 10 title game without playing Oregon, Indiana, Iowa, USC. Texas A&M could make the SEC championship game without playing Ole Miss, Bama, Georgia, Oklahoma, or Vandy. Georgia Tech could make the ACC title game without having to play Miami, Louisville, Virginia, SMU, or Duke. And it's like, it's not a good, the end of that whole thing said it's not a good way to determine a champion. And you 100% agree. It's like you dodged everyone the whole season. The biggest hope is that Michigan, that's the only game. That's the game that matters. Outside of the very first game against Texas and then the game against Michigan, those are the only 2 games that mattered in all of Ohio State's schedule.
I know the size of the divisions. Everybody's going to go, oh, well, there's so many people in the division, right? This is the problem with these divisions because there's so many stinking teams in the division. However, this is where I say if you wanted to build these super divisions, fine. But you got to play the right amount of games inside that division to make it make sense. Think about it in like NFL terms. It'd be like, hey, the Chargers are going to win the AFC West this year, but they never played the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, what? How do you say they're the best team in the AFC West and they didn't even play probably the best team in the AFC West? Like what that's what college does on scale. It's ridiculous.
Correct. That being said, I got Texas A&M in the game. Next game at noon, Notre Dame going to Pitt. Right now, Notre Dame's 12.5-point favorite. I did not like what the Pitt coach came out and said. They were asking him about the game, what he's been telling the players, and he is like, look, we can lose this game and we can still make the ACC championship. And I was just sort of like, not the thing I would have said coming out into the game. Like, It's pretty much accepting the loss before there's ever a loss. I don't like it, so I got Notre Dame in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pitt is a fine football team. Like they're probably properly ranked where they're at, which I do agree. I think Notre Dame's a better team. They should win the football game. But you're right. That's like a mindset of going, man, we could spoil Notre Dame's playoff berth with a win here. And instead, you're just like, yeah, we're cool taking a backseat and hopefully getting an ACC championship.
On a different note, something just to think about, especially if you just have some spare cash laying around that you want to throw at a historic bet. I'm not sure what Jeremiah Love's Heisman odds are right now, but I think it'd be worth a little side bet. Here's why. Since the inception of the Heisman Trophy, every year that's ended in a 5, 65, 75, 85, 95, 05, and 2015 have all been won by a running back. So, in order to make that come full circle in 2025, the closest one's Jeremiah Love. And I will say his stock's been rising. Now, do I think that he beats the Indiana quarterback out for it? No, that's probably where I would go for the Heisman, especially if he beats Ohio State. They beat Ohio State in the conference Big Ten championship. I'd say he's pretty much a dead lock for that right now. But Jeremiah Love keeps having 200-yard games and spinning off of guys, and he's going to get a lot more hype. Just as a throw that out there for my degenerate friends. Next, any chance, quick, Michigan loses Northwestern?
Not really. If Northwestern would have shown a little bit more offensively against USC, I would say maybe there's a shot, but they just looked outmatched. And again, I've talked about it all year. Like USC's doing fine. I'm not hating on USC, but they're not a real serious threat, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So if anything, teams can score on USC, and Northwestern couldn't even really do that. So no, I don't think Michigan loses.
Non-Power 4 big-time implications. South Florida goes to Navy. Right now, South Florida's minus 9.5. You think South Florida comes out with a victory?
They should. This is one of those, like, anytime you play service academies, I'm more surprised at like the 64.5 on the over-under. That doesn't seem like a typical non-Power 4 like service academy type score. Navy's, they can score, but they do it through running the ball a lot, and like usually that just chews up a lot of clock. And even though they're like scoring on every possession, it doesn't usually lead to too high of scores. If South Florida struggles, just has one of those days, and Navy does a really good job at controlling the ball and then like the time of possession game, sure, I think Navy absolutely has a shot. South Florida, however, with this like renewed, hey, we could still be that at-large team, should come out really fired up and make the statement.
Where, just to piggyback, where service academies win is they control the ball for the, when you look at a split in times of log, the service academy holds the ball for almost 40 minutes during a 60-minute game, and they just keep the ball away from the other side. Where service academies lose is their defenses are usually bad, especially on the line front and 100% in the cornerback front. It's such a difficult position. It usually doesn't work out well for service academies. So if South Florida can just throw the football, there's a high chance they win, because yes, the academies can score. You lose a little bit of discipline. They can score in one play with the option because the guy's just gone because no one's there from the second or third level to meet him. But a majority of the time, it's just slow, methodical pace. And the second they get a false start, they get a holding penalty, just so you know that drive's done. Like it's going back to South Florida. So if South Florida can just protect their quarterback, they'll win the game, I think, handily. Then going into the 3:30 games, Texas Tech comes off the big win against BYU. They're going against a down South or Central Florida team. Right now, Texas Tech 23.5. Do they cover?
You know, they should, but you're talking about down Central Florida. They just had their space game, and they were putting up points, man. I like that's just one of those like Texas Tech should win, but it's tough to cover those kinds of games when the other team scores offensively. So Central Florida has had very, you know, a dichotomy of seasons within this season of like very bad versus like they've shown up and done all right. So it'll really just depend on whether Central Florida shows up or not. But man, I will say Texas Tech now is like a legitimate contender.
Yes, 100% on that. NC State upsets Georgia Tech season a few weeks ago. They go to Miami. Miami's a 15.5-point favorite. Does Miami win or lose the game? I'm not even going to ask you about the cover just because Miami's been picked by double digits in both of the games that they've lost. So
yeah, this would have been an easier, I think Miami wins but doesn't cover answer.
There you go. Georgia Tech goes to Boston College. Georgia Tech's 16.5-point favorites. Can Georgia Tech just keep riding the train to get to the ACC championship?
Yes. Now that they've got the loss, this is one of those like there it is. It's over. It's done. They're going to do it.
Then next 3:30 game, Iowa at USC. Iowa comes off sort of a heartbreaking loss, drive down, get the leading Oregon. Looks like you're going to win. Oregon drives down the field, kicks the last second game-winning field goal. USC, on the other hand, they really have to have this one if they want any type of hope of maybe squeaking into the Big Ten championship game, but more realistically, keeping their playoff hopes alive. It isn't in the Coliseum. USC does have a good offense. Do you think their offense can outscore Iowa?
Yes. But
here's a better question. Do you think USC's offense is better than Oregon's?
Potentially, yes. I think our offense potential is better. Maeva in the last few games has shown very like, ooh, he is human kind of play that we just haven't necessarily had go against us. Like Northwestern had a pick six. If anybody wasn't watching that game, Northwestern had a pick six, and that would have changed the momentum in that football game on its head. Now, Maeva made a fantastic effort play, chased the big dude down, hit him at the 1 yard line, and the guy fumbled it through the end zone for a touchback. So instead of Northwestern getting a pick six and completely flipping that game on its head, USC got the ball back. Next play, 75-yard run or 70-yard run by King. And then USC scores, I think, on the next two plays. And just like that, instead of it being like 14-7 Northwestern, it's 14-7 USC. And that was like a huge flip in momentum. So potentially, yes, USC has like one of the best offenses in the country, honestly. But our defense sucks. And I'm worried. I mean, I called Iowa upsetting Oregon last week. That's what I called. It was really close to happening. I think, and I'm afraid that what I thought was going to happen last week happens this week. Oregon stood up to Iowa a little bit better from like, I thought it was going to be like a bully ball situation. And they didn't get bullied as much as I thought. Oregon just kind of struggled on both sides of the ball, but just like average. It was just kind of a low scoring, sloppy game, which made sense with the weather. They're not going to have the weather problem in SoCal this weekend, not that I think. And I'm worried that because our run defense is so soft, Iowa is going to just bully ball us. And I am worried on that one. From a betting standpoint, give me the over because I still think we're going to put up some points on Iowa. I just think it's going to be tough for us to stop them from running. And 48 is not a lot with powerful offenses.
Next 3:30 games, sort of a team I've already talked about. You got Virginia going to Duke. Duke is 4-1 in the ACC, so they're still alive in terms of ACC play. Yet two of those 5 teams that I talked about with one loss in conference. Virginia comes off the loss last week to Wake, which was a really bad loss, honestly, for Virginia. You brought this up? I can't remember if it was in person on the podcast. It's like that team that we watched against Florida State that was running the ball, offense clicking,
Doesn't
have not
exist.
seen them since. Yeah, gone. Duke's the favorite in the game. They're 5.5-point favorite.
So Virginia's quarterback got knocked out with a concussion, I think, in the second quarter last week. That I don't want to say completely changed the game, because we talked about Virginia's been begging for a loss for the last like 4 or 5 weeks. If he doesn't go, if he's still in protocol, yes, I agree with the line. So as the line stands now, I feel like Virginia, is in trouble because they couldn't do anything without Chandler Morris. If he comes back, it's closer, but I still don't have a lot of faith in the Virginia team because they're not doing anything offensively on the offensive side of the ball.
I agreed. I like Duke in the game. Virginia has just shown zero. Like they have not, since the Florida State. They were begging for a loss. They caught it, and I don't think that bodes well for them going into this week. That's just me. The last 3:30 game, bigger one, the biggest of the 3:30 games. Oklahoma goes to Alabama. Bama 6.5-point favorites. I'll tell you right now, I don't like this game for Bama. Here's why. Bama has the inability to run the football, has struggled mightily running the football. And it has really put the last few weeks, like you go all the way back to the South Carolina game, the Bama offense, like with Ty hasn't made any big time mistakes, but the passes haven't been as crisp. He's been getting hitting a lot more. And we know Oklahoma has a good defense. I think this game is going to come down not to Oklahoma's defense as much as I just hyped that up. It's what do we see out of Mateer? If Mateer comes in and is slinging the football, Bama loses. If Mateer comes in and struggles and that Oklahoma offense is stagnant like we've seen it against Texas and other times, it's still a low-scoring game. The total right now is 45.5. Honestly, I like the under of the game just because I think it's going to be that type of defensive matchup more than offensive. But if Mateer has a good game, Oklahoma comes out of Tuscaloosa with a win. Side note, Alabama has never beaten Oklahoma in the regular season.
Wow. That's a shocking stat to me. This one to me is going to come down to coaching. And what I mean by that is game plan. Like, both teams have shown vulnerabilities, but both teams have shown like national championship level play. So we've got that range of like the players could do either, right? And that's a total cop out from like choosing one or the other. I think though it's going to come down to like the coaching game plan. Like, does Venables come up with a good enough defensive game plan to force Bama into a run, or force a Ty Simpson's not going to beat us with his arm kind of game plan? And then what can DeBoer do to, like you said, stop Mateer, because they're probably going to struggle offensively. Like, I think it'll probably be very apparent in that first quarter of like who came out with a better game plan, and then who can make the right adjustments at halftime. Like that, and that's why I say it's going to come down to coaching, because there's going to be this chess match of going back and forth, trying to expose each other's weaknesses or take advantage of each team's strength. And so that one's tough for me. I'm gonna just take Bama because I've seen a more complete team so far this season than what I've seen out of Oklahoma. But I will not be shocked if Venables can come up with just an absolutely diabolical defensive scheme that shuts down Bama's offense. Because you're right, they can't run.
I've got Oklahoma in the game. That's my upset of the week is Oklahoma beating Bama. We haven't even got to the other upsets I got so far. All right, 7 p.m. games. And this is a pretty good slate of games going into the evening. Florida goes to Ole Miss. This is like prime time, classic Ole Miss to stumble and lose. Even though Kentucky just went down and throttled Florida, I just don't know what Florida team's going to show up. Like, The only thing that's not boding well for Florida is that Bill Napier's not coaching for his job.
That was gonna be what I said. Like if Billy Napier was still on the hot seat, you're right. But because he's gone, yeah.
You like Florida, or you like Ole Miss in the game?
I do like Ole Miss in the game.
Do you like him to cover 14.5?
My gut says no, simply just because, and this feels like it's the Billy Napier effect, but it feels like Florida, even though has never really come out with a victory in any of these games, minus Texas, like they have played all of the good teams very close. Like they've made good games out of all of the big names. Now, yeah, they lose to Kentucky, but it's like nobody thought that was a good game. So I'll say yes on the cover.
I will say he is undervalued this year, like especially in the national talk. Chambliss has been playing out of his mind. Like he's played a lot better than Jackson Dart, and that's not even a shot at Jackson Dart. It's really just talking about like Chambliss has really played the way that Lane Kiffin wants him to play inside that offense. And it's why, like, I mean, they put up 30 plus against Georgia. Like, they have an offense. They can score. If they get up into the 30s against Florida, game's over. Like, game's over. I think Ole Miss has a good defense. It's not a great defense, but it's good enough to, get a few stops. I got Ole Miss in the game. Utah, sitting there at number 13, goes to Baylor. Utah 7.5-point favorite. I find that, like, especially since we've been doing the podcast, every year we come in thinking Utah is going to be a good team, and then as the season goes on, I have less and less faith in Utah. Do you think they come out of Baylor with a win?
They should. I think Baylor is probably one of those teams whose record doesn't give them any national attention or really thinks that they're a threat. But I've seen them play some good football. I've been the opposite with Utah this year. I was one of those, like, I was surprised that everybody was giving Utah all this respect and talking about this, that, and the other thing. But they have played better than what I was giving them credit for. I do think Utah comes out of with a victory here.
Last year in the college football playoff, Nico and the Volunteers went into Ohio State and ended up getting smacked 42-17. He now walks in there with UCLA. Do they lose by more or less than? Is it closer than a 42-17 game? That would put you at a 25-point spread.
Yes. They'll lose by more this week.
Yeah, the spread right now is 31.5. So I think UCLA had some good wins. It was surprising, but I think that magic has like rubbed off of they're still a bad football team, and I don't see Nico any chance of them going into Ohio State and keeping this anytime relatively close.
How many seats does the Horseshoe have?
I'm gonna guess in the 60s or 70s.
It's going to be 60,000 more people than UCLA has played in front of, all season. So I think that's going to be a shocker to them.
There you go. UCLA sucks. They've been trying to move to SoFi for a few weeks now. Big game of the evening. Texas goes to Georgia. Texas, 2 losses against Florida and against Ohio State. Went to overtime against Kentucky and Mississippi State. But then they've got wins against Oklahoma, and then last week have a bigger win against beat Vanderbilt. They have a good win last week. Pulling up their schedule, my mind's just blanking on them.
Who, Texas or Georgia?
Yeah, they go to overtime against Kentucky and Mississippi State, but then they get the win against Vanderbilt. They go on a bye to face Georgia. Georgia has the close game against Ole Miss, but they find a way to win. Closer game against Florida, but then last week they come out and just absolutely curb stomp Mississippi State. Just felt like that old Bama hate that when Bama would come off a loss, like next guy up was Mississippi State for just no good reason. They just got cowbelled to death. Georgia's 6.5-point favorite. And we sort of talked about this a few weeks ago that if Georgia played like they did, Texas would win. Do you still feel like Texas comes out of Athens with a dub?
I've changed my opinion on this game probably 4 times in the last 4 weeks. Like because of what you said. Like Texas shows up and just struggles with a weak team. And you're like, Georgia's going to kill them. And then next week, Georgia's like, hold my beer. We'll struggle against a weaker team. And you're like, oh my God, Texas is going to walk in here. And then the best thing Texas got going for them is that they're coming off a bye. So guys getting healthy. They've got 2 weeks to come up with a good game plan. Georgia, the best thing they've got going for them is that they did curb stomp Mississippi State, and they've got some like good momentum, good confidence going into that game. I think Georgia is a better football team. I think Georgia should win. If they don't play as good of defense as they can, because their defense is an absolute weak spot for them, Arch has finally got a little bit of momentum going. That being said, he still makes a lot of pretty bad plays during the game. So if Georgia can take advantage of those, they should win. If they're not able to take advantage of those, Texas is going to keep this one really close, and I do see it going down to the wire. I'll take Georgia, though.
I feel like I'm repeating myself for the Bama-Oklahoma game. And it has nothing. I think that Georgia can run the football. I think the thing they have struggled with is just, Georgia's ability to throw consistently. They found that against Mississippi State. Gunnar Stockton looked better. That was against Mississippi State. That was not against a good defense. I think Texas has a really good defense.
Agreed.
And so like with Bama, I don't really feel like we know that Oklahoma has a good defense, Bama has a good offense. It's really on the other side of the ball. And I go right back to that. This game comes down to one person, in my opinion. It's Arch Manning. What Arch are you going to see? If anything, and this is the reason I'm going with Georgia, is that history has told me that Arch does not live up to the big moments. And so thus I'm taking Georgia. If you put a gun to my head and you say you got to pick one, who do you think has a better game? Do you think he blows the game or wins the game? The money's on blow the game. And so that's why I'm taking Georgia in the game. I agree with everything that you said. Like, I can 100% see this being really close going to the fourth quarter. Like, that's the only way it happens. For Texas to come out, it is a nail biter going into the fourth. The other way I see this game going is it's 28-0 at half Georgia. And Georgia just curb stomps them into oblivion.
Yeah, because I look at yes, Texas's big win is Oklahoma, right? But why did they beat Oklahoma?
Material was out,
yes,
comes off a hand.
They came. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Because they lost to Florida. Mississippi State should have won that game. 100% should have won that game. Vandy, I'll be honest, I don't think Vandy is as good as everybody has made them out to be. They have gotten the benefit of Vandy normally sucks. So the fact that they're just halfway decent, it's inflated in everybody's mind. But Vandy's not that good of a football team. And again, we talked about it. They were up 10 points within a minute and a half in that game because of the mistakes. But let Vandy come all the way back. Texas has this finishing aspect that or lack thereof. And unless they can get up on Georgia very, very quickly, the fact that it probably will be this grindy game, I'm giving the edge to Georgia because they're a better team than all of the other competition that Texas has played.
Yeah. The other key factor for Arch, and I think it benefits him greatly in this game, is that Georgia's defense has looked poor. It was funny. I was watching the Georgia-Mississippi State game with Gut, who's a huge Mississippi State fan, and before the game ever started, he goes, I'm going to be real honest, our offensive line sucks. And I was like, really? Y'all have stayed in every game? y'all play good against Texas. Like, what do you mean y'all's O-line sucks? And sure enough, like, very first quarter, it's like, guys, they'd bring a blitz, and straight up, my man could have walked and touched him before a Mississippi State fan ever even saw him. Wasn't even looking his way. Like, Mississippi State's line really bad. So it sort of gave Georgia this like overinflated, like, man, Georgia really played Mississippi State good. But I've also seen Ole Miss put up 35 against them. Like, I've seen Georgia's defense not look great, and it gives Arch some hope. If it was the Georgia defense a few years ago, Arch is getting murdered by the second quarter. So they have a possibility, but yeah, Texas in the game. And then final game of the night, TCU goes to BYU. BYU's a 4.5-point favorite coming off the loss to Texas Tech. Can they just keep winning to force a rematch into the Big 12 championship against Texas Tech?
I think so. They should. I'm a little surprised at the line. I mean, I know TCU can surprise some people, but BYU was just clearly outmatched by Texas Tech. But I mean, we just talked about how we think Texas Tech is a legit contender. So, you're comparing apples and oranges there with everybody else. So I think BYU should have this one handedly. I will say these like 22-15 or these super late night games, those are always the one nobody's watching those. Like, those are the ones that everybody's asleep and you just wake up the next morning, you're like, oh man, BYU lost. Like that feels like it happens a lot. It's the Friday night and then the super late, West Coast, Mountain West type games that can surprise you. But I think BYU shouldn't have a problem.
Yeah. And why do you wake up and find out? Because if you had stayed up for the rest of the game got over at 2 a.m. in the morning Eastern Standard Time. It's like, there is a reason that you have yet to see, Ohio State kick off at USC at 10:15 p.m. Why? Because ain't nobody. I don't. Even dedicated Ohio State fans are just like, dude, I have taken 6 5-hour energy drinks and my eyeballs are still going to sleep. Like, you just can't stay. You can take a midday nap, you can take an afternoon nap. You're still struggling to stay awake for that game. It's awful. I hate it. But that wraps up the Week 12 games. Any other final thoughts before going into the action?
Nope. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, time to pull chalks. We'll see you guys next week.
Peace.